This week is CSA Week, the busiest time of year to sign up for a CSA, or Community-Supported Agriculture Share. A CSA share is like a subscription box to the freshest, most flavorful food your local farm has to offer. When you join a CSA, you invest in the farm at the start of the season, and in return, receive a share of the harvest throughout the growing season. Find your farm today using FairShare's interactive farm search map at csacoalition.org/farm-search.
This is Your City Could Be Better, because it could be. I'm David Plotz. If you love your city and still complain about it, you're in the right place. Bianca Martin, if you had to have a data center right next door to your house, how would you design it so it fit into your neighborhood?
Ideally, it would be subterranean, so I didn't have to see it. But if that's not an option, definitely having public art all over it, like all of the local artists, making it something that's beautiful to look at. Maybe more than just a data center, that it would have more than that single use.
A data center / coffee shop?
Yeah, coffee. That is so Madison.
There will be $7 trillion invested in data centers by 2030, about half of that in the United States. And Madison, Wisconsin had been poised to get a lot of that money. A few months ago, McKinsey named Madison one of the fastest growing markets for data centers. I am not sure that they would say that today. Madison City Council just passed a 1-year moratorium on new data centers in the city of over 10,000 square feet, I think. And the nearby suburb of DeForest just killed a $12 billion data center project in the face of public opposition, a data center project from a company in Virginia. A couple of months ago, on a different CityCast podcast, CityCast Madison host Bianca Martin and I started to get into a fight about data centers. Now we get to finish it. We get to finish the unfinished business. Today on Your City Could Be Better. Would your city be better with a lot more data centers, or maybe none at all? Bianca Martin, host of CityCast Madison, welcome to Your City Could Be Better. I assume that you're talking to me on a landline or maybe from your horse and buggy.
Yeah, I mean, God, I miss landlines. I miss landlines.
It sounds like you do.
Yeah,
you do.
But I should say a distinction here for this conversation. I wouldn't need more data centers to power this technology that we currently have. So that's kind of the question, right? Is these mega scale AI is pushing that revolution and the need for the centers. So like how that's going to be done, where it's going to be done, who's going to profit. That's what we're talking about. Right.
And so today, let's talk about whether Madison is the right place for them, why Madison is so skeptical of them, and how that is playing out. Because I think this is a discussion that is going on in cities across the country. It's an issue in countries around the world even. But in cities across the U.S., this is a big fight. Data centers are, as you were saying, they're the factory floors of the information age. They are used for cloud storage. They're used for powering all kinds of businesses, for software services, and increasingly for these vast amounts of computing power that AI companies require. So University of Wisconsin at Madison, huge research university. You have in your city lots of water. You're surrounded by lakes. There's tons of water, which is necessary for big data centers. You have reasonable amounts of low-priced agricultural land nearby. Basically, to me, Madison seems perfect for data centers. Why is Madison rejecting the future, Bianca?
Whose future, David? I'd say Madison's not rejecting the future. I say that we're trying to choose our future, reposition ourselves, and build the future. Like, as you mentioned up top, we're putting a pause for a year to kind of get it right. And UW-Madison really wants to also be at the center of the AI revolution for building the technology, but also in an ethical lens. So UW is a fantastic place for research. We were just named #2 public university in the U.S. by Time magazine, and they're chomping at the bit to build AI. So Madison isn't whole-scale rejecting these centers from coming, but the city says, let's slow down, let's get it right, and the university says, let's go and develop the technology.
So where did the idea for a pause come from? Who drove it, and what were the reasons for this pause in the city?
Yeah, I mean, the main argument, it was being driven by our Mayor Satya Rhodes Conway, and a lot of the city council basically saying, oh my goodness, look at what's happening across the state. There's a lot of political attention on these centers being built and how they're being built. And are we ready? Like, if we get massive interest in Madison, and as you said, McKinsey outlined us as a great place for data centers. You gave the reasons. How are we going to handle that? And how is it fitting into Madison's goals? So let's slow it down. One of the core reasons is we actually don't even have an up-to-date framework for what a data center is. So there's some responsibility here about zoning and doing it the right way, and just having a plan is I think what they're calling a moratorium for.
But I think, I doubt you have a moratorium for new schools or for new parks or for new stores or new malls or new roads. Like, why would data centers, which we can talk about whether they are good neighbors or bad neighbors, but why would data centers be this one thing that is singled out for this kind of pejorative treatment?
Pejorative treatment. Well, big money, big impact, right? I don't know the latest mall that was going to cost $12 billion. So as you mentioned, our neighbors, DeForest, they just basically killed a $12 billion data center proposal. They're about 15 minutes north of us. And just the way that it would impact their utilities and water. There was a report from the Wisconsin Department of Administration that said QTS's annexation to DeForest was, quote, not in the public's interest, bringing up concerns about whether the village could adequately provide water and sewer services to the area. So, yeah, they're looking at natural resources. Feels like such a big figure, but the center was expected to need 125,000 gallons of water daily. So that's nearly 15% of the village's current supply. There's so much that the public didn't know and felt that the process was going too fast. So why are data centers being singled out? Because they're moving in really quickly. It's obviously being identified as one of the biggest economic drivers of the next couple of decades. And if we're going to do it, just let's do it right. Let's get our resources appropriately handled and recognize, too, that Madison doesn't have a ton of land. So it's a discussion about priorities as well. There is a major housing stock issue. And if we're going to be granting, let's say 7 data centers are interested and they're moving in and they get the A-OK, well, now where are we going to put housing? And I pulled this from Bloomberg. They said that data center areas are sending power bills soaring. Quote, wholesale electricity costs have risen 267% more than they were 5 years prior near data centers. So when we have an affordability crisis and people are thinking, this is going to up utilities for regular people, we want to get the details right. And I think another thing about climate change is on everyone's mind. And in fact, these data centers are major polluters. When you look at the whole picture, the energy demands that they need are unprecedented. And they're requiring new gas plants to be built, which also require more cooling and water from our natural resources. They're slowing down the closure of coal plants. And even a nuclear site in Wisconsin is in discussion being built to uphold this massive energy demand. And so when we're talking about how can we decarbonize, right? How can we decarbonize our environment? And we're seeing our administration getting rid of rules around the EPA and rules for our limits. People are concerned, and there are real tangible impacts of climate change today. So it's just it's a matter of getting our priorities right as the rush of very well-resourced companies come in and might be able to get away with things we don't want them to.
Sure. And I don't live in Madison. And as far as I know, where I live in Washington, D.C., I don't know that we've had a data center issue. But when I hear you talk about this, it feels to me like a form of NIMBYism disguised as caution or disguised as care, that it's pretextual. People say, oh, we're going to protect farmland, or there's going to be a strain on water capacity, or there's going to be a strain on power. So let's get it right. But what that basically means is don't do it. And not doing it for a year or turning it away entirely, as the town of DeForest does, means that these folks will just go somewhere else. The development won't happen there. It will go elsewhere. But you lose the benefits of that growth. And I guess I just find it self-defeating. and destructive to the future growth of a city like Madison to say no to something which does have to move fast and which is critical infrastructure. But people are like, critical infrastructure, but not for me. For you can have that critical infrastructure where you live, but I don't want it where I live. But it doesn't work that way.
I guess Wisconsinites don't have a great taste in their mouth and don't have short memories about big industry coming to town and promising huge economic benefits. I mean, we have to talk about Foxconn, which was a promised $10 billion investment, 13,000 jobs promised. Donald Trump, our president, was saying that it would be the eighth wonder of the world. He was here in Wisconsin to cut the ribbon with Governor Scott Walker. And the local government put $1 billion in infrastructure investment into that project. And that completely went south. And Mount Pleasant and the surrounding area, they're still licking their wounds. We're not saying that we don't want investment, we don't want money, but we know, and as us here city casters know, local, we care about each other more than somebody who is not here. You know, like, what future are they building? What are we being a part of? We're a Rust Belt state. Like, that loss of manufacturing and hollowing out of that economy, like, that is just not that long ago. And we want to make sure this economy, as it changes, that we're best positioned to, you know, reap the benefits and not be holding the bill when something like AI which is developing so fast, could leave us behind. I mean, I've got 5 iPhones in this house that were decided they're, you know, this one isn't good enough. Let's make another one. Let's make another one. And these are corporations that have their own interests in mind. And I think it's very prudent to ask for even 1 year. I mean, 1 year. If you can't wait 1 year, if this is such a slam dunk deal, then in a year and a half from now, it should still be a slam dunk deal.
Foxconn is a great example of how a state, a region, in this case, Wisconsin, can get completely screwed by a company and by a bad decision. And obviously what happened there was a real bummer for your state. You always take a risk whenever there's investment. But you know what is also a risk? Not having investment. I live in, as I said, Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. surrounded to the south by Northern Virginia. And Northern Virginia, for a bunch of different reasons, some having to do with the fact that the government's located in D.C., but some having to do with just prudent and ambitious investment in this area, has a huge concentration of data centers. And it's been unquestionably an enormous boon for this region. Enormous. Created, you know, the minimal numbers of jobs at those data centers, not huge numbers, but incredible amounts of spillover economic activity. So the one estimate from 2023 is that those data centers created $31 billion in economic activity in Northern Virginia in that year alone, which is a phenomenal amount of money. And it happened, you know, because these centers, these places of capacity were there and people could, you know, take advantage of their proximity to build different kinds of technology businesses off of it. And then there was a real estate prosperity that comes off of it and other sorts of services that come off of it. And Northern Virginia has gone from being a rich area to being one of the richest parts of the entire country because of this. I don't know why a city like Madison, which has this amazing intellectual capacity built in at the university, which has, you know, it's rich in natural resources, would take the risk of foregoing this opportunity. It really, like, when I think about it, I mean, obviously, you know, you and I are seeing this very differently. It feels foolish to me. It really feels foolish.
And you're not alone. You're not alone. But one thing I know about people in Madison is we're not foolish people. Like you said, it's a very intellectual city with a fantastic university that is anchoring building and developing AI ethically. And there are a lot of concerns about AI, and we can dig into that. But why, to your question of, but the money, take the money and run. Don't you see? It's spillover. The word spillover, the amount that we are getting is still would be astronomically impactful. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. But I think what people in Wisconsin a lot of people in Wisconsin recognize, first of all, it's not cool to be rich in Wisconsin. No one is that. It's cool to be rich in DC. Look at my Lexus. Like, that's not a value of Wisconsinites. What is a value of Wisconsinites really deeply, I think, through and through, and in Madison, is fairness. And the system where there's a man that is about to be a trillionaire who's developing this technology, why them? We want to be that. The University of Wisconsin, like, we want to do that. QTS is partnering with UW-Madison. $1.5 million. Give us $1 billion. I mean, I know obviously that's not how the world works, Bianca. And we in this country are living in an affordability crisis. And we do have to recognize that around these data centers, utility rates are going up. They're saying that that's the conversations that are happening right now. And one of the reasons to slow this down, because it's not a black and white conversation, but that we need to have assurances that these centers are going to pay their fair share and that normal working class people are not going to be shouldering the burdens of these folks.
Of course, there are things that are more important than money, and health and happiness obviously are more important than money. But if you look at the history of the United States and the history of Wisconsin, like so much of what causes prosperity, it causes people to have a level of economic security and prosperity that allows them to thrive, is advances in technology, advances in education, advances in medicine, all of which are driven by investments in the basic infrastructure required to do that. And the University of Wisconsin is seen as a successful university, not because people go and they get a degree. It's seen as a successful university because people go and get a degree and then they go do things which add value to people's lives in the world. Sometimes that value is in terms of longer life or a new medicine. Sometimes they create an object that people want to use. But to do that, you need to have access to the tools, the infrastructure that makes that possible. And like it or not, the infrastructure that's going to most likely advance the economy and create opportunities in the next generation is dependent on this high information, these massive hyperscale server farms, because that's where you're going to get the advances in medicine. That's where you're going to get the changes in technology that will allow fusion to come along and therefore for some of the climate change abatement to be possible. And I think it's really naive and backward looking to say the infrastructure required can go somewhere else and we still get the benefits of it, but it can go somewhere else and they can deal with it. It doesn't work that way. It has to go somewhere. And as it happens, the places where it goes seem to be reaping the economic benefit. And I guess if I were at Madison or if I were an administrator at University of Wisconsin-Madison, I would be really annoyed right now. I'm already pretty annoyed. I don't even live in Wisconsin.
I love it. We're doing a good thing. And you're taking one side and I'm taking the other. And I want to be clear that I love science. I live for science. I love innovation. I could not wait to go to UW-Madison. And I think all the power to them in trying to develop this technology for the public interest. And I think that is the question that I want answered. And I know a lot of people want answered, which is, we need to unpack the inevitability that this much energy is necessary. What is AI being used for? All of these great advances, right? Fantastic things. We're going to optimize our lives and create better car batteries and catheters, and we're going to change the world the way that we love to do in Madison and the way that we have excelled and shaped the nation. And how do you optimize?
You're not. Not if you turn around. Not if you turn all this stuff down. You're not.
But we're not. UW is not turning it down. To be clear, they're putting hundreds of millions of dollars into AI. They're opening a new AI computing school. They're bringing 50 faculty. They are. I don't speak for UW. That said, what's cool is they're saying it, and former Vice Chancellor Charles Isbell, he came on the show and talked about this, that we want to have an ethical lens. One of the strengths of the United States of America, of UW-Madison, is the pairing of the humanities with the sciences. Letters and sciences, it's one of our most powerful schools for a reason. And we have to think about the ethics. And when we're thinking about optimizing our world, we're thinking about having better lives. And so how do you optimize things? frequently surveillance. Like AI is surveilling people. And as these developments, I've seen them in recent years, I don't know that I'm happier. I'm on my phone. I'm concerned about deep fakes. I'm concerned about AI bots. And I'm not trying to be a technology, dismiss, oh my gosh, look at all the horrible things. I don't want technology. I don't want to say that. But we have to think about the people who are shaping AI. And if we can do it here, fantastic. Or we can have people who live lives that aren't even remotely close to our lives come in and say how we should use our resources and then use them in ways that ultimately have implications for our privacy, have implications for our environment and for our future happiness and well-being. It all just needs to be thoughtful. So I guess I'm not saying no data centers. I'm saying slow down.
I guess my last point, I suspect that a lot of what is driving the skepticism in Madison and other places about this is a kind of revulsion and fear about AI. And look, why not? One should be super skeptical, but I think you guys are going to regret it. I think you're going to regret it if you cast this opportunity away. That said, Bianca, what do you think that listeners not in Madison can take away from this conversation and use to help to make their city better?
Yeah, well, everyone is grappling with this conversation. All cities have major energy demands. We're all facing a changing climate. We're all facing how do we support our schools? How do we have successful economies? These are all questions we're all facing. And I think if you can take from this conversation that know your value, know that your resources are valuable, and slow down, fall in love, Al Green, get a prenup, make sure that you have assurances and regulations, things that are going to not leave you holding the bag like we had in Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin, Foxconn. Make sure you're doing your homework and participate in every way.
Okay, Bianca Martin, let us change gear. Let's find something to agree on. How about? Let's go to our City Chatter segment. We need to rename that segment. So listeners, if you have a better idea for the name of that segment, send it to us. Send it to me at david.plotz@citycast.fm. I have a question for you. So if somebody moved to Madison tomorrow, if I moved to Madison tomorrow, what is the one habit that I would have to adopt immediately in order to survive and thrive in Madison?
Be good at small talk. Seems like something that everyone needs, but particularly in Madison. And I picked this one in part because I used to live in D.C. for about 4.5 years. And I'll just say I had culture shock moving to D.C. and then culture shock when I moved back to Madison because people will talk to you here for no reason. People you do not know, strangers, they will compliment you. They will find something to talk to you about. Weather, obviously. You'll be like, why is everyone always talking about the weather? It's more about relationships and anchoring relationships with one another. Just this morning, I went into a coffee shop to get breakfast, and I had my headphones on listening to my podcast about AI and data centers. And the woman's like, oh my gosh, your scarf is so great. And I was like, oh, thank you, and then immediately I had to say, oh, you should go to this local shop that sells scarves out of Garber Feed Mill. They've got ones that are really similar. And then a woman walking into the coffee shop is looking at me like she knows me. And I do not know her. And she's like, oh my gosh, that scarf, I just saw one at Woodman's. Oh my God. And everyone was smiling. And that is not something in major big cities you necessarily have to reckon with. I remember being in DC, Noma's platform for the metro, and I saw a woman looking fantastic, and she had an amazing skirt on, and I walked up to her in the morning and I said, that skirt is incredible. She looked at me like, why are you talking to me? Do not talk to me. And I was like, okay, heard. So that is the thing, is being able to understand that people want to connect. If you're sitting by me, there's a very good chance you're going to get talked to, kind of like on a plane. Not that necessarily everyone likes that, but it's kind of nice too.
Oh, that's nice. That seems human. It seems really human.
Yeah.
Well, you're not wearing a scarf now, Bianca.
No, I'm not.
So I can't. There's nothing I can compliment you on. You have a nice top. Great top, Bianca.
Thanks, David. Okay, so that's what you have to do if you move to Madison. What's your advice, David? If somebody moves to DC, what's one skill they have to pick up?
You have to be really comfortable talking about work. People in DC talk about work a lot. It's a worky city, and that is people's access of, engagement with the world. A lot of people, like, it's their first thing they think about, and they do talk about it in very detailed, particular, passionate ways, in a way that I think is somewhat different from other cities. And some people find it really off-putting and think it's transactional or networky, but it's actually just that's people's main interest is work. And so they talk about it. And so you do have to learn how to engage with people about their work and be able to talk about your work. So there we go. We just did it. We just had a whole podcast conversation about our work.
Yeah, I'm used to that. Yeah.
Bianca Martin is the host of CityCast Madison. Thank you for coming on Your City Could Be Better. Listen to Bianca every weekday on CityCast Madison. That's all for today's episode of Your City Could Be Better. I'm your host, David Plotz. Our producers were Lizzie Goldsmith, Priyanka Tilve, and Haley Sperling. Our music is by Carl Christensen. If you're enjoying the show, why not tell your friends, rate the show, leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. We will be back next week with another conversation, possibly less contentious, about how your city could be better. I'll talk to you soon.